Welcome back. What up, my guy? How are you, bro? You chilling? What's the deal? What you doing? What you up to, bro? Got all these other YouTubers probably corny and whack, right? But thanks for the like, my guy. Appreciate you. 99 Hanktivist. Having a couple beers and have a relaxing Sunday afternoon. Hell yeah, bro. Enjoy yourself, man. Sunday's a holy day, bro. Sunday is definitely a holy day, bro. Peace and love sent from above. I'm bored. I don't know what to do. Trying to figure this out somehow. I need to figure out how to get 100 viewers. I don't. Then again, I don't want that many viewers because I wouldn't even be able to answer everybody. Yo, did you hear about the secret UFO files that Trump is about to reveal and unveil? It's just crazy. The AI 3 Atlas, I think it's called. Wow. What up, guys, though? What are you guys doing? Who's in the chat? Let me know. Talk to me, bro. Do you believe in aliens, sir? Bro, honestly, I think aliens is true. I don't know because there's a lot of things where the Soviets were spying on the Americans. The Americans are spying on the Soviets, and they're using these type of aircrafts that look like aliens, but I think there is some extraterrestrial material due to science, bro. I don't know, bro. There's shows, it's proven facts that there's other forms of water in other solar systems in the galaxy, so it's kind of a proven fact. Anywhere there's water, there's gonna be living organisms. So I don't know. I can't call it. I never seen it for myself, but from what they're saying, what they're teaching us, from the knowledge that's exposed to us. What do you believe in, God? What do you believe in, huh? In a big bang, bro. Comet is probably gonna hit this shit and we're gonna have to start all over. How about you? What do you believe in? Well, the Steelers are playing, bro. Yeah, we could throw that on, bro. I was just skipping through, checking out my TV. We could watch that. I don't want to fall right now. Ping pong. The Steelers are playing, right? What channel? What channel are the Steelers playing? Brother got 72-inch TV. What kind of TV you got, bro? In this day and age, you gotta have a big TV, no? I mean, I had the same TV for a couple of years now, though, bro. Yeah, 75-inch. I don't think mine is... I don't know how many inches this shit is, bro. It's a Samsung, though. My football team probably be the New York Giants, bro. I mean, yeah, probably the New York Giants from New York. So I'll probably root for the New York Giants. Oh, word? The Cowboys and it just depends what streamers or channels you get. Where? Hey, where you at in the Bronx, bro? Oh yeah, you told me. You said you're from the Bronx, but you don't live in the Bronx no more. That's right, bro. Facts. I'm thinking of something creative to do. What if I... No, that's... what creative shit can I do right now? What if I show everybody how to mix the leafies that I mix? Nah, I am my chipper self, bro. I'm more my chipper self in the morning time. I got more energy, but at this time I get a little tired, but I'm still myself. Hell no, bro. I just feel like streamy. Yeah, bro. I'm about to watch, bro. I'm about to, hold on, bro. I'm about to chipper myself, man. I'm about to... Thank you, bro. Thank you for checking in, my guy. I love you, bro. You the best, bro. You the best, man. You the best, man. My man's checking in on me, man. Thank you, my guy. Love you, bro. Peace and love sent from above, bro. All of a sudden, there's 6 other people checking in. Nah, I like basketball, honestly, bro. I like basketball, bro. I like basketball, bro. Basketball is where it's at. Hold on a second, though. Wait. And then, hold on, I gotta fix the cameras up. Fix the cameras up. Ching chong ching ching. Gotta fix the camera. Boom. Fix the cameras up. Oh shit, I just turned the TV off. Just got into basketball. I know absolutely nothing about it, trying to learn. Yeah, my guy. So, basketball is where it's at. I don't even have a team.
Eso te pasa por meter tu pinche cucharita donde no debes.
Why are you so insistent? I own the entire force, and not just here in Mexico. I own the DEA. I own the marshals. Why can't I own you? Why don't you take the money I offer you to look the other way? What's your price? Maybe I should ask your wife. Yes, Wilson. Your daughter. She's in school right now. No? I don't think so.
Throw my green shorts on because, hold on, bro. I'm not trying to get in my drawers, man.
You don't deserve
Crazy.
that horribly. Dímelo todo.
Now, I'm about to do that right now.
Seem to anticipate our maneuvers, and in other cases they seem to, I came across an email where the word "stalked" was used in a this very secure email between Navy officers discussing their ships being pursued by a UAP.
In our previous panel, we had
Bing pow. Bing boom. What's the name of what, man?
Cyclotech Cruise Up. The Cyclotech Cruise Up is a groundbreaking air vehicle that brings the power of cyclo-rotor technology to life. Designed with passenger comfort and safety in mind, it's the result of 15 years of research and flight testing. This eco-friendly ride is set to change the way we travel by replacing traditional, pollution-heavy transportation. With 6 rotors, Cruise Up is super safe. It can keep flying even if one rotor stops working. Its unique design
Dang, you
lets it
just
move
had it
precisely,
on
including
TV.
flying backward and stopping midair.
Wait, what?
Zooming up to 150 kilometers
It's
per hour,
raining,
and going
it's
up to
raining
100
right now
kilometers
like
on a
crazy,
single
bro.
charge. Cruise Up is perfect for city travel and offers a
Mad
whole new
rain
way to get
outside,
around.
bro.
In motion,
Yo, there's 12 people watching. Everybody hit that like, bro. Like, subscribe. The fuck?
Whether you're commuting to
Stop
work or
hating
cruising
and
around
shit,
for
bro.
fun, it offers a
I
perfect
need
mix of
these
speed,
3,000
range,
watch
and convenience.
hours and shit, man.
With a strong motor and long-lasting
fuck,
battery,
bro?
you can count on smooth, reliable rides every time. It's lightweight, foldable, and easy to carry or store, great for people always on the go. Its sturdy frame handles different road conditions with ease, while advanced brakes, intuitive
Do you have
controls,
a
and bright
developmental disorder? Smoothest, bro. You a funny clown, my guy. That's mad funny, bro. What was the lunch today? Oh, I ate a roller roaster. I ate some roast beef with cheese fries, bro. Every day I eat lunch, breakfast, dinner at the same time, bro. That's craziness, bro. Yup. Can you hear the cracks? Like my back cracked and shit? Can you hear that shit or no? He ate everything. I'm about to eat some of these pumpkin seeds now. Whoop wop, bing bang. Ping pong, boom, ping pong, boom pow. Peace and love to you guys, bro. I love you guys all, bro. Be safe, bro. Hit the like, man, and subscribe, man. Let me see what I should put. What should I put on, bro? Starting at 9, Canelo and Crawford. What? That's fire. Canelo and Crawford, bro, is gonna be on today. They're gonna be fighting. Boom, pow, ping, pow, pow. All 11 of us. He ate everything, all 11 of us. Yeah, man. Good. Peace and love, man. Stay focused. Stay safe out there and stay sane out there. Yo, what do you think I should get? Netflix or
Bright LED
Hulu?
lights keep
Should
you
I get
safe and
Netflix
controlled.
or Hulu, bro?
Plus, the smart
I'm
companion
about to
app lets you
subscribe to
track
one of them
performance
because it's
and
getting
settings
boring,
to
bro.
suit your
But I'm
style.
thinking either to get
When you want
Netflix
to
or
check practical
Hulu.
design, the in-motion
Hulu or
display takes
Netflix?
personal
Which
mobility
one
to the
should
next
it
level.
be? Give me the good,
Jetman,
the
flying like a dream. It's not quite like the
give me
Iron
the
Man
good.
suit from the movies, but the Jetwing from Jetman
Bro, I'm
Dubai
mad
is the next
fat.
best
I'm a
thing.
fat boy
It
at
actually
heart,
lets
bro.
people fly through the sky with surprising
Just because
ease.
I'm a fat boy
This
at
amazing
heart
wing is made from
doesn't
super
mean
light
you can
carbon
make
fiber
fun of
and
me,
is
you heard?
powered by small but
So what?
powerful
I'm
jet
fat,
engines.
bro.
Thanks to
There's
this
nothing
high-tech
wrong with
design,
being
it
fat,
can
man.
reach blazing speeds up to 253 miles per hour. What's
Excuse
even more impressive is how far
what?
and high it can go. The Jetwing can
Exercise
travel up to
shows.
31
Stop
miles.
making fun of me about being fat, man. So what? I'm fat, bro. So what, bro? I'm fat. That doesn't mean nothing, man. That just means that I'm fat. So what, bro? I'm a little fat. There's nothing wrong with that. All kings were chubby. All the kings in this world were chubby. Why? Because they living good, bro. I'm living good. I'm eating what I want. I'm gonna get on a diet soon. I'm gonna lose some weight soon. But for right now, I'm a little fat, bro.
It's the most expensive arms race in history, but the real cost could be far greater. In 2020, nations poured a staggering $2.7 trillion into their militaries, a record high even as they drowned in pandemic debt, battled runaway inflation, and watched their infrastructure crumble. On today's episode of the Infographic Show, we're looking at why every country is preparing
BK
for a
all
war
day.
that none of them can actually afford to fight. For decades, the General Dynamics Ordnance and Tactical Systems Factory in Scranton ran just one or two shifts. The 155mm artillery line turned out 10 to 14,000 shells a month, plenty to keep U.S. stockpiles full and allied nations supplied. Not anymore. Now the factory floor blazes with activity. Welders shower sparks across steel casings, while massive hydraulic presses stamp shell bodies out of 2,000-pound bars of steel with mechanical precision. The air thrums with the sound of artillery rounds rolling off the assembly line every 4 minutes. The factory is running at wartime pace. 3 shifts, 7 days a week, pushing out almost 40,000 shells monthly. The numbers tell the real story. Ukraine consumes more 155mm ammunition in 2 weeks than the U.S. produced in an entire year before 2022. The factory's shells immediately replenish dwindling American stockpiles, drained by aid shipments to Kyiv. But it is a losing race. Every shell that rolls off the production line represents a small fortune to the average American family. But it's all part of the desperate and dizzying arithmetic of modern war. The scale of global military spending has finally reached levels that would make Cold War planners
Huge
sweat.
48.
The United States alone spent $886 billion on defense in 2024, a figure so massive it exceeds the GDP of most nations. But breaking down that astronomical number reveals the true scope of America's
Huge
military
250.
commitment. The Pentagon alone gobbles up hundreds of billions.
That's
But
funny, bro.
emergency
That's
supplementals
funny,
tell
but
the real story.
It's
Congress
not funny
approved a
because
staggering $30.6
I'm
billion
not 250,
emergency
bro.
request for ammunition stockpiles.
I'm like
More money than most countries spend
170.
on their entire military. Another $113 billion went to foreign aid, much of it replacing American
Huge
weapons
tits.
shipped overseas. The result? America is funding three major fronts: Ukraine's fight against Russia, an escalating Middle Eastern war, and a military technology race with China. For the first time in American history, interest payments on the national debt, $640 billion annually, now virtually exceed defense spending. The Treasury Department's own analysts describe this as entering uncharted fiscal territory, where borrowing costs compete directly with military readiness for federal dollars. China's response has been equally dramatic, though shrouded in characteristic opacity. Beijing's official military budget
What
for
up,
2025
Spider?
is $296 billion, representing a 7.2% annual increase that is sustained for over a decade. But Western intelligence estimates suggest a real figure approaches $450 billion when accounting for dual-use technologies, military-civil fusion programs, and off-budget nuclear modernization. Beijing now possesses the world's largest navy by hull count and has doubled its nuclear warhead stockpile since 2020. And it fields hypersonic weapons that U.S. defenses cannot intercept. Each Chinese military advance triggers billion-dollar American countermeasures, creating an action-reaction cycle that certain pundits have called the world's most expensive chess match. Europe's rearmament tells an even more dramatic story. Germany, which spent decades treating military modernization as an optional expense, eventually committed to doubling defense spending within 5 years to surpass NATO's 2% GDP target, upping the target to 3.5%. After Putin's invasion of Ukraine in 2022, the then Chancellor Olaf Scholz announced a €100 billion special fund for military modernization.
Oh yeah,
the
World
largest
War
defense
II
investment
coming.
in German history.
That's
while
what I'm
warning the
watching.
Parliament that we are living through a turning point in history. Today, Germany has surged to become the world's fourth largest military spender. Its defense budget is now the highest in Central and Western Europe since the 1990 reunification and the collapse of the Soviet Union. All of Europe is following suit, some like Poland leading the charge. Spooked by Russian aggression, the Poles almost immediately increased military spending to 4% of GDP, ordering almost 1,400 K2 Black Panther tanks from South Korea and 250 M1A2 Abrams from the United States. The total package amounts to $6 billion for a nation with a GDP smaller than Florida's. What is going on? Even traditionally neutral nations have abandoned decades of military restraint. Sweden, which maintained neutrality through 2 world wars, not only joined NATO, but increased defense spending by 40% in just 2 years. Finland followed suit, ending its careful balancing act between East and West to become NATO's 31st member. Nothing illustrates Europe's security transformation like Sweden's quiet quest to prepare for war. In 2018, the Swedish government mailed a 32-page pamphlet titled "If Crisis or War Comes" to all 4.8 million households. The booklet, updated for the first time since the Cold War, provides instructions on stockpiling food, finding shelter during air raids, and identifying disinformation campaigns. Most Swedes probably thought this kind of preparation was history, but neutrality isn't neutral when your neighbor threatens nuclear war. You choose a side. Sweden's military transformation has been swift and costly. Defense spending jumped from $6.2 billion in 2021 to $8.75 billion in 2024.
Please
with
hit the
plans to
like.
reach $29 billion by 2035. The government reintroduced military conscription, expanded civil defense programs, and began construction of new underground command bunkers. Most symbolically, Sweden abandoned its policy of arms export restrictions, shipping AT-4 anti-tank weapons directly to Ukraine. Switzerland's response has been more subtle but equally significant. The Alpine nation, famous for armed neutrality and secret banking, quietly authorized $6.5 billion for F-35 fighter jets, despite fierce domestic opposition. Swiss military planners have begun modernizing the country's extensive network of Alpine fortifications, bunkers and tunnels built during World War II that can shelter 114% of the population. More telling is what's happening in Switzerland's financial sector. Major banks have established economic warfare task forces to prepare for potential exclusion from international payment systems. Credit Suisse's collapse in 2023 taught Swiss authorities that financial neutrality offers no protection in an interconnected world where sanctions can cripple entire economies overnight. Meanwhile, in 2024, Japan poured $50.2 billion into defense, its largest military budget since World War II, and an 11% jump from the year before. But the nation is drowning in debt, with a debt-to-GDP ratio of 260%. A defense buildup against China is projected to drive spending up 65% over the next 5 years. Nearly a third of Japan's population is now over 65, and the debt service alone will swallow 40% of government revenue by 2030. This is today's debt trap reality. It's impossible for anyone in these types of situations to overlook the confounding influence of the COVID-19 pandemic. The global event not only killed millions, it financially crippled nations that are now racing to rearm. Global government debt spiked during the pandemic, creating the worst fiscal crisis since World War II. Countries that spent trillions keeping their economies alive are now spending additional trillions preparing to stave off existential threats abroad. The United States, despite its economic strength, runs a budget deficit of 6.2%, levels the Congressional Budget Office describes as unsustainable. The federal debt reached $33.7 trillion in 2023, growing by $1 trillion every 100 days. Yet defense spending continues climbing, driven by China's military expansion and indefinite security commitments to partners across the globe. Things are even worse in Europe. The continent's economy contracted by 6.1% during COVID-19, the worst recession since the 1930s. Energy costs exploded after Russia's invasion of Ukraine, with natural gas prices spiking by 400% and forcing governments to subsidize heating bills. Now these same cash-strapped nations must fund massive military modernization programs, partly out of peer pressure and partly due to a genuine fear of resurgent authoritarian revisionism. With a debt-to-GDP ratio of 144%, among the highest in the developed world, Italy should be cutting spending. Instead, it increased military expenditures in 2024 in a bid to get up to the 2% minimum threshold stipulated by NATO, committing to new fighter jets, naval vessels, and missile defense systems. Back in 2018, during President Trump's first term, he was already pressuring the Europeans to spend upwards of 4% of GDP on defense. After one fiery meeting with the American president, Italian Defense Minister Elisabetta Trenta burst out laughing at the president's demands. Spending 4% of GDP on the military cannot be done, she told the press then. It isn't even thinkable. It's already incredibly difficult to get to 2%, even though we have agreed to that. In today's jittery security climate, even Italy is scrambling to justify pushing military spending beyond 4% by 2035. One creative solution is building the world's longest suspension bridge between Sicily and the mainland, then reclassifying it as a national security expenditure and NATO strategic asset. Suddenly, a $16 billion construction project becomes a loophole, disguised as a landmark. We respect the hustle, but calling a bridge a missile shield? Well, that's a stretch, even for NATO. The United Kingdom is still reeling from Brexit's economic disruption and post-pandemic inflation, and also scrambling to build bridges in the quest for military modernization, but not in the literal sense. The Brits recently locked themselves into a 50-year AUKUS nuclear
See that? You
submarine
see, I had
deal with Australia,
73
worth up to
viewers.
£20 billion for Britain in exports over the next 25 years. The price is about 5% of Britain's entire annual government spending, financed entirely through borrowing. Meanwhile, Australia is going all in. It's spending 368 billion Australian dollars over 3 decades for nuclear submarines, including billions funneling back to US industry. Former Prime Minister Paul Keating called it the worst deal in all history, warning that it puts all of our defense eggs in one basket. A retired senator and submariner piled on, it won't deliver capability fast enough to deter, let alone fight the war it's supposedly for. The brutal economics of modern warfare make traditional cost-benefit analysis obsolete. Consider Ukraine. Western nations have provided well over $200 billion in military and economic aid since February 2022, and that's more than the annual GDP of 140 countries spent in just 3 years of conflict. Modern weapon systems carry price tags that would fund entire government departments. A single U.S. hypersonic missile costs over $14 million. That glitzy B-21 Raider stealth bomber program is projected to cost $203 billion for 100 planes. That is $2 billion per bomber, enough to buy each one a seat on the Fortune 500. But there is good news. Adjusted for inflation, Aviation Week now says the first 21 Raiders might cost only $668 million apiece. That's right, military budgeting has entered its off-brand Costco era. Buy in bulk, save billions. Meanwhile, the F-35 still runs $80 to $109 million per jet. And that's before you add lifetime maintenance. That price tag currently stands at $1.58 trillion and will only increase. It's proof that stealth doesn't come cheap. especially when it needs software updates more often than your iPhone. A war over in Taiwan could trigger a $10 trillion global economic shock overnight. Half of the world's semiconductor supply, the chips that power every iPhone, every car computer, every advanced weapons system, comes from Taiwan, and nearly all of it is made within 100 miles of the potential invasion zone. Reuters sketched the nightmare in blunt detail. In the mildest scenario, China encircles Taiwan with a naval quarantine, cuts underwater cables, and dares the world to intervene. In the worst-case scenario, it launches the largest amphibious invasion in history while raining missiles on U.S. bases in Japan and Guam. Either way, war games agree. Even if the U.S. Navy sinks ships and holds the line, it bleeds badly doing it. The Brookings Institution warns that China's military gains have made the outcome inherently unknowable. But one thing is certain, everyone loses, especially Taiwan. Despite these terrifying projections, Western countries continue arming for the type of globally interconnected conflict that could destroy their very way of life. The Pentagon war game concludes the same way it has for 3 years running. America would win the military conflict, but lose the economic peace, spending a decade recovering from a war that lasted 6 months. Putin's 2022 invasion of Ukraine certainly didn't reassure anyone. Instead, Russian aggression jump-started the biggest military buildup since the 1930s. The ripple has spread worldwide. China's rise under Xi, aircraft carriers, hypersonics, destroyers, sent neighbors scrambling. India pumped $75 billion into defense. The Philippines, historically inward-looking, is throwing $35 billion at military modernization. Japan is sharpening its self-defense force into a real joint military with bite, and is exploring a partnership with South Korea, once wartime enemies, to co-develop missile defense systems to counter China and North Korea. Political scientists call it the security dilemma. One nation rearms, rivals react, and costs spiral. China builds carriers, the US builds subs, Russia rattles nukes, Europe rearms. Everyone sees defense but feels offense. It's the world's most expensive game of chicken. Everyone is spending billions but no one dares to blink. For NATO's smaller states, the 2% GDP pledge makes the most sense, yet for such small economies it can feel like a straitjacket. Estonia spends nearly 3% of its GDP on defense, despite having less economic firepower than Tulsa, Oklahoma. Latvia's 5% of GDP defense bill now tops its education, health, and infrastructure budgets combined. If proposals in Washington prevail, U.S. defense spending could explode to $1.7 trillion annually by 2034, a peacetime figure nearly double the Cold War peak. Without a plan to pay for it, that increase would more than double the federal fiscal gap, turning a fixable budget challenge into a full-blown economic time bomb. And nowhere is the cost of modern warfare clearer than in Ukraine. On March 15, 2023, a visiting American intelligence officer watched as Ukrainian artillery crews torch $50,000 in ammo every minute. Each 155mm shell costs $8,000. HIMARS rockets come in at $168,000 a shot. Guided Excalibur rounds are somewhere between $60,000 and $112,000 each. And that is just the surface. Russia's Zircon hypersonic missiles run over $5 million per unit.
Chase is
China's
hating.
DF-17 glide vehicle probably cost billions to develop. The U.S. has spent billions trying to catch up. With
Don't
no
watch,
fielded
get out of
system
here.
yet. Even cheaper systems add up fast. Turkey's $5 million Bayraktar TB2 drones proved deadly, but jamming them costs billions. The U.S. Army's new AI-integrated air defense system is priced at $1.1 billion each, meaning a Patriot battalion would probably cost $4 to $5 billion, and likely obsolete in 5 years. Cyber war flips the equation: low-cost offense, sky-high defense. Estonia spends $50 million a year protecting its networks. The U.S. pours nearly $10 billion into cyber command, with billion-dollar contracts to Microsoft and Google for infrastructure that didn't even exist a decade ago. The real bottleneck is manufacturing. Ukraine has been given over 8,000 Javelin anti-tank systems, but the U.S. makes 2,400 annually. Semiconductor shortages are now delaying weapons production, and China controls a vast percentage of the rare earth minerals needed for advanced military tech, creating a choke point money can't quickly fix. History backs the warning. The Soviets spent 15 billion rubles in Afghanistan and collapsed. Britain won World War II but limped out broke. At the height of the wars in Iraq and Afghanistan, the United States was spending upwards of $12 billion a month. Forecasts of a Chinese invasion of Taiwan have U.S. costs topping $1 trillion annually, or 6.7% of GDP, not counting the shock of a global supply chain collapse. The security dilemma that once fueled superpower arms races now threatens the economic foundations of civilization itself. Every defensive measure appears offensive to rivals. Every weapon system demands countermeasures. Every alliance obligation triggers cascading spending that no treasury can sustain indefinitely. As military budgets soar while nations struggle under record debt burdens, the fundamental questions remain unanswered. Are they preparing for victory or mutual destruction? In their desperate race to prevent their own annihilation, have the world's powers instead guaranteed it? If tensions keep rising, the next big conflict is likely to erupt in the Pacific. Watch how US will respond if China invades Taiwan to see one of the most likely flashpoints, or click on this video instead. It's the deadliest ship on the seven seas, especially if you're serving aboard. Well, pretty much only if you're serving aboard it. It's the Admiral Kuznetsov, and it's the absolute worst ship to ever sail under the Russian flag. Admiral Flotta Sovietskого Soyuza Kuznetsov, or in English, ship which barely works, was designed during the late Cold War. The Soviet Union had a historical disadvantage when it came to naval warfare, largely spurred on by its lack of access to warm water ports. This makes fielding a large maritime force difficult. But Russia's immediate proximity to large European powers also means that throughout its history, its army has been prioritized over all other services. Yet navies allow one to project power globally. And without one, it doesn't matter how big your army or air force is. You'll only ever be a regional power. Without a navy, you can't hold enemy economic interests at threat unless they are a landlocked power, and resupplying your own troops becomes difficult. Protecting your own economic interest is also practically impossible, especially if you're heavily dependent on sea trade. This is the driving force behind China's massive naval buildup in the Pacific. The Soviet Union didn't completely axe its navy, but it knew that it couldn't compete with NATO, or mainly the US Navy. America has historically been the opposite of Russia, with two big oceans on either coast. The US has by necessity been a naval power. By the early 20th century, the US Navy was muscling in on the Royal Navy in terms of tonnage and capability. By the end of the Second World War, the US Navy reigned supreme, and would remain that way until China would rise to threaten it. And even then, China only presents a regional threat to the US Navy, not a global one. In the Cold War, the Soviet Union had two maritime goals in case of a war. First, to delay and disrupt US shipping to Europe, and the second, to defend its own shores and keep the US Navy from joining the fight. With a naval air force larger than most national air forces, the Soviet Union was in effect facing two American air forces. To achieve the first goal, the Soviets had to break the Greenland-Iceland-UK gap, a stretch of ocean that runs between the three countries. Getting a surface action group past this defensive line was a dicey proposition at best, if not completely impossible outside of World War III historical fantasy books. However, the Soviets did have the capability of launching an amphibious assault against Iceland, linchpin of the Atlantic defensive line, albeit only if it could take NATO by surprise and move swiftly. Breaking the Atlantic line was vital for the Soviets keeping US firepower out of Europe. With a wall of NATO nations between it and the ports used to offload American troops and equipment in Europe, the Soviets could only hope to interdict American shipping across the Atlantic trade routes, much like the Germans attempted to do. Exactly like the Germans, the Soviets relied primarily on submarines to accomplish this task, and fielded a very large and capable submarine force for just a task. This left the Soviet surface fleet with the mission of defending Eastern Bloc shorelines from the US Navy, a role they would be far more survivable in. Operating close to shore in a fortress fleet doctrine, Soviet ships enjoyed the protection of shore-based air defenses and anti-ship missiles. However, the Soviets still wanted the capability to project power far from home in low-intensity conflicts, where they wouldn't have to face far more sophisticated naval forces. And there was the prestige of owning aircraft carriers, America's crown jewel. Thus, the Admiral Kuznetsov class was designed from the ground up for a fundamentally different role than that of the American carrier fleet. Until the Kuznetsov class, the Soviets never had true aircraft carriers, instead operating cruisers that could house small air wings. At first, this was only a small helicopter complement to aid in scouting and anti-submarine warfare. But in the 1970s, the Soviets laid down the Kiev class, a hybrid cruiser and fixed-wing aircraft carrier. Originally, the Soviet Admiralty wanted to develop a comparable supercarrier to the American Kitty Hawk.
What up, Brandy?
However, budget realities soon set in, and the survivability of these massive platforms against the might of the US Navy was put into question. Thus, a compromise was reached, resulting in what the Soviets would call a heavy aviation cruiser. This fancy bit of wordplay, which should be familiar to Japanese audiences, was actually a pretty fair description, but also necessary so that the Soviet Kiev class could exit the Turkish Straits. Under the 1936 Montreux Convention regarding the regime of the Straits, warships transiting the Turkish Straits between the Mediterranean and Black Sea were limited to a certain size, tonnage, and weaponry. Aircraft carriers over 15,000 tons were forbidden from crossing the straits.
Pumpkin
This was a
seeds.
problem for the Soviet Union, as it built all of its aircraft carrying cruisers in present-day Ukraine. While aircraft carriers over 15,000 tons were forbidden from crossing, aircraft carrying warships were not, as at the signing of the treaty, many battleships carried a small complement of aircraft for spotting fire and reconnaissance. Thus, the Soviets simply called their ships aircraft carrying cruisers. And all was well, despite the complement of up to 12 Yak-38 VTOL aircraft. To be fair, the Kiev class was also packing significant firepower aside from its aircraft. Its foredeck was littered with air defense and surface attack missiles, as well as 10 torpedo tubes. The ships could pack P-500 anti-ship missiles, up to 8 in total, and sporting a fearsome 2,200-pound warhead, or alternatively a 350-kiloton nuclear warhead. Flying at Mach 3, these missiles haunted the dreams of U.S. sailors, and were surprisingly sophisticated for the time. Fired in salvos, the missiles would
You
fly
allergic
at
to
wave-top
pumpkin?
height, with one missile flying at higher elevation and using its radar to feed targeting data to the other missiles. If that missile was destroyed, another missile would automatically take its place. Upon reaching the final phase of their flight, all of the missiles would pop up and turn on their radars, with half the salvo homing in on big U.S. carriers and the rest on its escort ships. Only 3 of the Kiev class would be built, with one becoming a Chinese luxury hotel in 2014, another turned into a naval museum in 2016, and the third broken up and sold for scrap. A subclass of the ships known as the Baku subclass would result in one ship, the Admiral Kuznetsov. This ship would be sold to India in 2004, refurbished, and continues to be in service with the Indian Navy as the INS Vikramaditya. And this is where we get at last the Admiral Kuznetsov class, and the ship which would be the flagship of the entire class, named, well, Admiral Kuznetsov. Planned to be a 2-ship fleet, only one was built thanks to the end of the Cold War and the Russian economy tanking. It might be smaller than a supercarrier, but it still packs a formidable punch and is well worth the title of aircraft carrying heavy cruiser. Its primary armament is the Sukhoi Su-33, the carrier variant of the Su-27. Developed to replace the VTOL-capable Yak-38, the Su-33 featured an upgrade in range and payload, which forced the Soviet Union to ditch the VTOL concept entirely and build the larger Kuznetsov-class ships in the first place. It only carries a fraction of the aircraft of a U.S. carrier, but with 18 Su-33s on board, it's still a formidable weapon against lower-tier regional naval powers. However, the Kuznetsov isn't large enough to field an AWACS platform, which is where the 6-ship flight of MiG-29Ks come into play. Theoretically, the MiG-29s would have been able to network together with other aircraft and provide an airborne early warning and air control system, but that capability never truly materialized. Instead, the 6 MiG-29s were part of an incomplete order, which was meant to replace the entire Su-33 complement aboard the Kuznetsov. This leaves the Kuznetsov with a glaring vulnerability, as a surface action group without AWACS in the sky is just begging to be sent to the bottom of the sea. This is why aircraft carriers are so critical to modern blue water naval operations, and why, despite having more holes in the water, China remains unable to challenge the US far from its own shores. For a ship designed to fight close to home, though, this isn't a big vulnerability, but it does mean that the Kuznetsov is basically a liability in any conflict that doesn't take place under cover of shore-based air defenses or against a relatively unsophisticated foe. However, the Kuznetsov packs one hell of a punch with its 12 Granite anti-ship missiles. These supersonic missiles pack a 1,600-pound warhead that can sniff out American carriers at a range of 388 miles. The missiles are so physically large and move so fast that even a direct hit from a Sea Whiz system isn't guaranteed to stop the carnage, as the supersonic wreck of the missile slams into a ship's structure with deadly kinetic energy.
Thank you, Billy Bob.
Considering the
How
US
you know?
fleet was and still is largely fielding anti-ship missiles with a third of the explosives, the Granite continues to give sailors headaches to this day. But the Kuznetsov was almost never a part of the Soviet fleet at all. The ship was laid down in 1982 at the Nikolaev South shipyard inside of Ukraine. When Ukraine and the Soviets went on the splits, Ukrainian President Leonid Kravchuk sent a telegram to the ship's commander politely informing him that his aircraft carrier now belonged to an independent Ukraine. The captain was promptly ordered to sail to Vidyayevo before the Ukrainians could get their hands on it, ensuring it would have every opportunity to waste billions of Russian rubles in the years to come. In 1995, the Kuznetsov had its first deployment, and immediately the warning signs of what would be called ran flight operations from early morning until 9 p.m. each day, flying aircraft close enough to the Israeli coast that the nation scrambled F-16s to escort the Russian fighters. Everything went a severe water shortage amongst the crew.
How does
And
she
for
help
repairs,
you?
the ship would suffer the fate of much of the Russian
Eating
Navy,
pumpkin
as major
seeds.
financial problems caused severe cutbacks in the defense budget. The ship's fate was in effect as frozen as the Northern Fleet shipyard it lay moored in, with repairs being halted due to no funding being available. It wouldn't be until 1998 that the ship's overhaul was complete and she was cleared for service once more. However, aircraft carriers, or aircraft carrying heavy cruisers, aren't cheap to operate. The U.S. spends $1.5 million a day per aircraft carrier in operational costs. Thus, the Kuznetsov was stuck in port for a further 2 years, finally cleared for deployment in the Mediterranean in 2000. However, the sinking of the Kursk, a Russian-powered nuclear submarine, canceled any plans for deployment. Famously caused by a lack of maintenance and poor training, the sinking of the Kursk was an alarm bell for a long-neglected Russian fleet. In the wake of the tragedy, Russian admirals called for more funding, warning of future
pumpkin
possible
seeds.
disasters. But budgets were tight, and the Russian Navy was a low priority. The Kuznetsov would assist in recovery of the Kursk before having future deployments once more canceled. As the world would come to see, this was probably a good thing, as soon serving
She
aboard
helped me with my
Kuznetsov would be one of
children.
the deadliest jobs in the Russian Navy. In
Are you
2004,
trolling me,
the
bro?
carriers went out to sea for sea trials and inspection, showing worrying signs of poor maintenance. Nonetheless, she was cleared for operation, and in 2004 she partook in a large exercise in the Atlantic. In 2005, she would claim her first victim and highlight a crippling deficiency that would claim aircraft for over a decade to come. In 2005, the Kuznetsov was undergoing
Thank you.
training in the North Atlantic when a Su-33 piloted by Sub-Colonel Yuri Korneev came in for a landing. According to the Russian government, the plane's brakes failed, causing it to skid along the runway and crash into the ocean. Luckily, the pilot was able to eject and was safely recovered, with the Russian government later dropping depth charges on the wreckage of the plane 3,000 meters below, and then sending a submersible to ensure the plane was properly destroyed. However, soon sources came forward to counter the official government story. According to these sources, as the Su-33 came in for a landing, the arresting cable responsible for safely slowing the plane down broke. The Su-33 was thus sent sliding across the deck and over the edge. For a Russian government so focused on public perception, it would be easier to blame the airplane rather than one of the most fundamental systems of an aircraft carrier. However, whatever the truth is, further training flights were canceled as the Kuznetsov once more sailed for home. In 2006, the Kuznetsov was slated to return to service after modernization efforts to correct fundamental issues with the ship's systems. But it wouldn't be until December 2007 that the Kuznetsov was once more sent on deployment. Here, the Kuznetsov would enter a sort of grace period, where everything largely worked as it should. However, a lack of proper maintenance by a cash-strapped Russia, determined to prove it was a legitimate naval power, would lead to disaster. In 2009, a short in a wire caused a fire which would kill one crew member. Later that year, the ship caused an international incident. On February 14, 2009, a European Maritime Safety Agency's Clean Sea Net satellite alerted to a detected oil spill just off the southern coast of Ireland. An Irish Air Corps patrol aircraft was dispatched, visually confirming the spill surrounding the Admiral Kuznetsov and its underway replenishment ships. Coincidentally, the Kuznetsov was undergoing refueling at the time, but the Russians immediately denied that anything had happened. The British, meanwhile, estimated about 300 tons of oil had been spilled. The Russians admitted culpability, though claimed only 20 to 30 tons of oil had been spilled, while either washing the ship's decks or pumping out the bilges. Consider those numbers. The Russians were apparently greasing their entire flight deck with oil an inch thick to cause a massive spill. Of
God
course,
bless
it
you
wasn't
too,
20
bro,
to
and I'm
30 tons
Jewish,
over
hell
the
yeah.
300 tons over an area 4 miles by 5 miles. 2 days later, the Russians confirmed they'd been undergoing refueling when the spill happened, but did not know how or why it had occurred. Given that the Kuznetsov was
Hit
at
the
this
like.
point being escorted by
Hit
one
the like
tugboat
button.
in case it broke down, the cause of the spill was pretty obvious. 10 days later, the Russians would admit fault and claimed that human error and technical malfunction had been to blame, with what technical malfunction that was exactly remaining a mystery. In 2011, the Kuznetsov was sent to menace the world's oceans once more, in a deployment lasting until February, when it departed Syria for its home port, and promptly lost all propulsion. Despite a year of repairs after the oil spill incident, the Russian fleet had such little faith in the Kuznetsov that it once more had been deployed with an accompanying tugboat. That proved prudent, as the Nikolai Chikar would take the mighty Russian's fleet flagship in tow and slowly drag it back home. She would have one more successful deployment under her own power, until she was once more deployed in 2016 off the coast of Syria to support Russian military operations, bombing civilians because military targets are too hard to accurately hit. Once more, she was accompanied by an ocean-going tug, which probably really filled her small surface action group with great confidence in the Russian flagship's ability to survive combat. The ship's Su-33 had been fitted with bomb sights to allow the use of free-fall bombs with limited accuracy, allowing the carrier's planes to carry out ground attack missions inside Syria. By now, the Kuznetsov was famously belching out huge clouds of black smoke as she steamed along, and on October 21st, she passed through the English Channel. The British Royal Navy dispatched 2 ships to escort the largest Russian naval deployment since the Cold War. On November 14, 2016, a MiG-29 took off from the carrier on a routine exercise, only to be put into a holding pattern when the crew realized that one of the arresting cables had once more broken. Rather than be diverted to a nearby airbase, the ship's captain ordered the pilot to stay in the air. Inevitably, the MiG-29 ran out of fuel and was forced to ditch into the sea, with the pilot being rescued via helicopter. The incident highlighted not just the gross incompetence of the ship's captain, which cost the Russian Navy an $11 million jet, but also the disrepair of the ship itself, as well as its greatest design flaw.
This is my
job. Had basically been designed to be a carrier light, it utilized a ski ramp to aid planes in taking off. However, ski ramps severely limit the fuel and ordnance of a carrier aircraft, as well as the type of aircraft the ship can deploy. On a full-size carrier, or one with more powerful launch facilities, or even planes with more powerful engines, the MiG-29 would likely had enough fuel that when it became obvious the arresting cable wasn't being fixed, it could have still made for a friendly airfield. But that's just not the Russian way. And despite the arresting cable historically snapping in two, the captain ordered the plane to stay in the air until it ran out of fuel. The Kuznetsov continued combat operations, with the Russians claiming major victories in airstrikes against Islamic State terror groups. Given that the ship was already suffering from a severe shortage of qualified pilots and the imprecision of Russian precision weapons, these claims remain dubious. However, on the 3rd of December, half a month after its first arresting gear failure, the Kuznetsov struck again, destroying another Su-33 as its arresting gear failed once more. The Su-33 slid straight into the drink, and the pilot was
subscribe, matter of fact.
At this point, the Kuznetsov had downed more Russian aviators and inflicted a greater financial
that will help me get a
content
creator job, bro.
It was decided that the rest of the air power on the ship would be transferred to airfields to continue combat operations, to what we can only imagine was the great relief of the entire crew. Field repairs were carried out until Russia ceased the involvement of the Kuznetsov's battle group in the region and dispatched it for home. Now safely in port at the 35th Ship Repair Plant in Murmansk, the Kuznetsov would lose its appetite for Russian planes and develop a new one for Russian lives. In what could only be described as a comedy of errors, the Kuznetsov took on the job of single-handedly destroying as much of the Russian defense budget as it possibly could. The ship needed serious repairs, but whether it was the vodka or completely unfounded Russian optimism, the Kuznetsov began a modernization program to extend its service life by 25 years. Huge combat ships are expected to have service lives that extend into the decades. After all, U.S. carriers can serve for half a century without major maintenance.
It's called entertainment industry.
Carriers also generally just work. The Kuznetsov did not only not work, it was fundamentally flawed, with an aircraft arresting system that saw systemic breakdowns and also had no role in the modern cash-strapped Russian military.
Is back, you're right.
Kuznetsov was a bad ship with no mission, but it was a prestige item for Vladimir Putin's Russia. So, in typical Russian fashion, Russia doubled down on an absolutely terrible
what's good, Pig Mama?
Because sunk cost
looks like a Trollio gang is
not
coming after you.
Serious upgrades to its superstructure, electronic components, arresting gear, crew facilities, engines, everything.
Planet of the Trolls is coming.
Floating dock, one of the largest floating docks in the world. This was very much a case of Freddy meets Jason, as PD-50
gotta pull up your shorts down a bit.
It was built
Looks
in
like one of
1978
the
for the
nerds.
Soviet Union by Sweden, and at the time would be the world's largest floating dock.
Jeep.
However, during sea trials, 2 of its ballast water tanks collapsed
Oh, so
and threatened
pull
to
them up?
sink the dock, prompting the Swedes to quickly tow it back to shore. Repairs were made and PD-50 was handed over to the Soviets. The Soviets took PD-50 in tow using 2 Dutch tugboats. However, after sailing past the Norwegian coast, PD-50 attempted to defect to NATO and made a break for freedom, breaking free of its tugs. Unfortunately, its quest for sweet
I gotta
capitalist
ask
freedom
him which
was ended
sense though.
when storm winds blew the dock ashore on the Soviet side of the Norwegian border. Damage to the dock was extensive but ultimately deemed repairable. Thus, the dock was shipped to a Norwegian shipyard where 4,000 tons of steel were used in its reconstruction. The accident-prone PD-50 would cross paths with Kuznetsov in 2018 when it had enough
What up, my G? How are you?
and decided to permanently quit the chat, and it would try to take the Kuznetsov with it. PD-50 suddenly began to sink, causing Kuznetsov to sink with it, and one of the dock's 70-ton cranes to come smashing down onto the Kuznetsov's flight deck. The accident left a massive 200-square-foot hole that would cost 70 million rubles to fix. The crane itself would take until the end of 2018 to be removed, slowing down repair efforts even further. The Kuznetsov was at least floating, though, and repairs continued on board the ship. In late May 2019, it was decided that 2
What up, guys? Hit the like and subscribe, motherfuckers.
And other large surface vessels of the Russian Navy, though this would take a year and a half of construction efforts.
Big man, people always hating on your shorts. They look good. Nah, these ain't Lululemon. These are cheap. These are called Avalanche. They were in TJ Maxx on sale. My Lululemons is in the dirty pile. You can't have both. Don't be picky.
The finish line was in sight, and the ship was being prepared for removal from dry dock. That's when the world's most flammable ship went up in flames again, with Russian state news agencies claiming the fire was promptly put out.
I love you guys,
the ship's damage control system had done its job with no damage. The Kuznetsov would make its triumphant and murderous exit out of dry dock in February 2023. However, the ship is estimated to still need about a year of overhauls before it is combat-worthy once more. And combat-worthy is a term we're using about as loosely here as the Russian Navy. It'd be more accurate to say that it'll be about a year before the Kuznetsov is ready to return to the task of generally doing more to hurt the enemy than its own crew and the Russian budget. Generally, but not completely. Now go check out analyzing Russia's massive failures in the war against Ukraine, or check out this other video instead.
Between the Steelers and the Jets. The symbol of East Rutherford with our announcers, Iron Eagle, J.J. Watt, and Evan Washburn.
3 years homeless.
JB, it's time for football. NFL kickoff weekend from the
Bonnie's, right? Yeah.
Today, Aaron Rodgers makes his Pittsburgh debut in the stadium he used to call home. 41 years
That would be funny, right?
A brand new chapter. And we're here in the broadcast booth. Hi, everybody. Great to be with you. Iron Eagle, J.J. Watt, Evan Washburn down on the sidelines. It's a new season.
It's time for pumpkin seeds, then it's time to troll and harass people. You right, bro? You know the vibes?
Warm-ups this time, so I think I'm going to do all right today.
All right, we're ready to go, and let's talk about a guy who's not a rookie. 21st year in the NFL, Aaron Rodgers, Pittsburgh Steelers. How is all of this going to fit together?
Well, it's really interesting because last time he started this season at MetLife Stadium, it didn't go exactly how he wanted to for a new team. The Steelers are hoping today is different. How is he going to marry himself up with the Arthur Smith offense?
I put that shit on for you guys. I'm about to go outside for a minute.
We're all excited to see how that works. And of course, DK Metcalf.
I'm about to go to the store and
brought over from the Seahawks. DK is a go ball guy. And Aaron Rodgers is one of the best go ball throwers in the game. So today, we're going to see if they can connect.
It's a fresh start for the New York Jets. They have a new head coach, Aaron Glenn.
I'm trying to learn, you guys.
New quarterback.
My boys, my people.
Justin Fields. And moments ago, he was with
my friends.
Evan Washburn.
Justin, as we approach kickoff, what are the emotions like as you get set to lead the Jets in week 1 against a team you played for a year ago?
All right, guys.
Emotions are high. Everybody's pumped up, ready to go. So,
Hit the like. I love you guys, bro. I'm going to the store.
As the quarterback of this
Peace and
offense,
love
what do
from
you need to do
above.
to
Yeah,
make
I'm
sure
leaving, but I'm gonna come back. I'm gonna be live again, bro, in a little bit.
Not take any side.
You heard? 99 Honda Civics SI. You my boy, bro. Bye, Devin. I love you guys. Devin, bye. 99 Honda, my boy, bro. See you later. Be safe, my brother. Thank you for tuning in. I love you guys, man. For real. You guys give me a purpose to live, bro. I love you, man. Seriously. Tune in later or tomorrow. Love you, bro. Thank you, man.